Welcome to the Cascade podcast Ideas Without Frontiers. We thought it would be good to introduce some of the people who helped to make Cascade happen, including our board members and global council. They all have experiences and insights which are worth sharing.
Hi, my name is Mark Anderson, and this is the Cascade podcast, Ideas Without Frontiers. We're starting a new series now where we'll be interviewing members of our global council. And so this first interview is with somebody I've known for many, many years. And actually, I would probably count as one of the people who really inspired me to do what we're doing today. So without further ado, Roberto Escarré, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for your words.
And Roberto, let's start off. I haven't said what you do because I'll let you introduce yourself, because I know you've been working for many years in international education, but now you're doing something slightly different as well. So maybe a little bit about what you're doing now and what you've been doing that led you to this.
Okay, so yeah, in my, let's say, my previous life, I was working on an international project management office in a university in Alicante in Spain. And this office was mainly focused on developing projects in the higher education sectors in developing countries all around the world, in Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, etc. So we were covering different topics in order to support those universities, and most of the times with EU-funded programs, covering by Tempus, Alpha, later on Erasmus+, etc. So that was what I was doing for about 25 years. Some of those projects were in a specific topic on intellectual property, so related with research, management, etc. And I've been working on this topic for a long time in parallel. And now I'm working only in this topic at the moment. I'm working only in intellectual property, and also an EU-funded project, the IPK China. I'm working in Beijing. I'm based in Beijing at the moment. And this is a project that is funded by DigiTrade of the European Commission, and that is implemented by the European Union Intellectual Property Office. So that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Fantastic. So we'll come back to your current work in a moment, because I think there's some interesting aspects to that, especially what it's like to be living there in China in isolation from your previous colleagues, family, etc. But before we do that, let's go back to your work in international education. To begin with, how did you start? What was the factors that kind of led you to being interested in that area? What's your background?
Well, my background is on basically international relations. I studied a master after my degree in geography and history. I studied a master in international studies at Alicante University, and later on I did a postgraduate degree in Amsterdam. So I did start working on projects already when I finished this postgraduate degree. I was working as a stagiaire in Brussels in a consulting company. And I started working on, at the beginning, was only research and development projects or development, focusing on developing regions in Europe, etc. Okay. So that was the starting point. Later on, I had the possibility of submitting a proposal to set up an international project management office at the University of Alicante. Okay, so at that moment there was something already. There was a kind of a structure, but there was focus only on research projects. So on supporting researchers that they were applying for EU-funded programs. And I decided to start a new line on cooperation for development projects, international cooperation for development projects. The university had some experience. In fact, there were some other colleagues that they were working before, but they didn't have an structure and they were not very successful on applying on this. So the first project that I get was, I mean, besides research, the first one was an alpha project in Latin America. And I think this opened for the university and for me also the possibility of applying to several programs that the EU was, I mean, the EU was at that moment, the European Commission, they were promoting several activities with developing countries with a regional approach. There was a program in Alpha, I mean, for Latin America, there was Tempus, East Europe, some Mediterranean, etc. There was an Asia Link program. So this was, I would say that was 90s, more or less, end of the 90s, when they start funding a lot of programs on these areas on higher education. So that's basically my start point on this.
Yeah, and I know because I started working with you on projects probably in the early 2000s,
Yes.
and in this you were a victim of your own success. No, I mean I think at one point you were dominating some of the programs so much that they really tried to limit how many projects you did. Is that right?
Yeah, there was a huge call. I mean, the most important call that was Tempus, and at that time they were funded. For the whole Europe, they were funded about 60 projects, and in one of the calls, I think I get about 9 or 8 projects. So at that moment, the European Commission they decided. I mean, they invented a kind of University of Alicante rule. So no coordinators, I mean, no universities in Europe, they may coordinate more than 3 projects. So yeah, that's one of probably a kind of success, but painful at the end, yes.
And then of course they brought all the regional programs all came under the umbrella of Erasmus Plus, right? And so
Exactly.
basically still working with different regions but under the same program. Did that change the kind of the approach at all, or was it how did you respond to that?
Yeah, well, there was I think it's quite difficult to understand. I mean, of course, I understand the reasons behind all these changes in the programs and how there was. I mean, I understand, of course, the European Commission, they have policy priorities, they have EU delegations on all these countries, etc., and they have to compensate or they have to work with them. But for me, it was a little bit difficult because there were some calls that they were really interesting and that they were working very well, that they were canceled. So for instance, there was EduLink, for me was a program that was working quite well in ACP, Africa, Caribbean, Pacific, and with really good outputs. And then when Erasmus Plus opened, I mean, took what you said, when it took all the regions, Africa and the Caribbean, they were not included at the beginning. So there were some years that the main focus was in Asia and besides Europe, etc. Okay, I mean, East Europe, etc. So that's difficult to understand how this, I mean, how the policies are evolving and how this is affecting universities that they are working with these countries. Okay, at the end, the final clients are universities in developing countries. And I think there have been several opportunities on these programs to get funding and to develop good ideas and to develop services and improving, I don't know, the research and technology centers and the separation that between teaching and research functions. So there have been several priorities, and I think there was an interesting evolution that I think my university was quite successful on this process.
Yeah, so people who are listening to this, and you and I kind of speak the same language in many ways. I think, you know, after you, I was trying to do something pretty similar in my own university, and I think a lot of people, especially people outside Europe, will be kind of scratching their heads a little bit about how this all works. And I think the first thing to understand is, of course, these projects, were funded by Europe, but they were really centered around countries outside Europe, especially in the global south. So for you, obviously you were successful, you kind of understood the programs. What do you think are the elements of success? Because you don't have to be a European to apply for them. You don't need to be a European institution. So what do you think are the key success factors in developing a proposal of this kind?
Yeah, well, I think there are several factors. I think there is one common issue. I mean, when we talk about relevance of these projects, is of course the context of higher education, and we find that, I mean, because that's my opinion, but I think that most higher education systems, they have common problems. Okay, we, for instance, in Spain, we have a problem on the quality of higher education or on employability of graduates, and the same problem or similar problem they have in Colombia, but of course the scope is different. Okay, so I mean, the basic idea for me is that it's not that you have to copy paste the solutions that we had in Europe on the last 25 years or 30 years on the problems on the higher education systems, but you can explore, you can think about which of these solutions that we have could be relevant for these countries. And if you have this point where clearly when you contact those countries, and of course there has to be an interaction between the project, clearly you know that you may respond to those problems, then of course I think this is, for me, this is the key for success, if you find this point. So for instance, I remember that we had several projects, but we had one specifically on financial management of higher education institutions in Latin America. And we did a huge survey on 18 countries on the problems. The problems were very similar. And there were problems that we had before in Europe. Okay, so there are problems about accountability, problems on how to manage research staff, all these kind of things. And after 2 or 3 meetings before submitting the proposals, we knew already that there was a common point where we could work, okay? So that's, for me, the important thing and the crucial issue. What sometimes is not easy, because Mark, you know, as me, that for instance, if I want to start a project in Bangladesh and I start contacting universities there, they will not understand sometimes the program, they will not know me, of course, they will not see the added value of those activities. So this is a long process, no? And usually it works when they have a kind of background on projects, on international cooperation, etc. Okay, so those are some factors, I would say.
Yeah, and I guess the on top of all the kind of the logistical problems, there's also a whole kind of cultural area that you're dealing with, and obviously we're working in a context where the funder is from Europe, and so we have a certain and there is this kind of question of like, you know, the global north going in and telling the global south how they should run their organizations. But behind that, there's a whole kind of raft of things that it is after all a collaboration between institutions. It's not a you know, the idea is to have partners, not to have kind of institutions you're ordering. So how do you tackle that? What do you see as the kind of main kind of that intercultural competence or you know, collaboration aspects?
Yeah, that's also a crucial issue, and I don't know. I don't have a straightforward answer. What I can tell you is that for cultural issues, in some areas, it has been easier for me as a Spaniard to deal with those issues, and in some other countries, it has been really a challenge. Okay. Because even if we, from the very beginning, was explained that, of course, this is a project where the beneficiaries are those institutions and that we are providing support, And if they don't like anything of what they have to say, and we may change the activities, we may change the approach always, etc. But there is always this north-south issue. And I found that in some countries, it was really difficult to deal with that. No? And we have to talk a lot. I mean, we have to start the dialogue between, between peers, but also between, our presidents. They had to also give a hand, also at different levels, in order to reach this common understanding, because the cultural issue, clearly could, have an impact if you are not in the same, let's say, frequency, if you are not in the same line. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And that kind of, I guess it's that whole sweet spot of them being as interested in the project as you are, because if they're only interested in taking the money, the project's always going to fail, right? It's always going to be a really uphill struggle. And just to give us a flavor, because you work in different regions across the world, and you've kind of, as you say, you've found this, you've had to find the way of like working together. Could you give us some examples of places that you've been to where culturally you found it especially surprising or interesting, or something that kind of changed the way you thought about things a little bit?
Yeah. Maybe a good example is Iran. I was working on a project on internationalization of the. It was not a structural project, so we were covering, I think, 6 universities in Iran, and it was very challenging, Mark, because these people, they have a really developed higher education system, and we have to admit this from the very beginning. So the approach has to be different, because, for instance, if you have a look to research publications on journals, scientific journals, they are above Denmark, for instance. So, there is something that you are not going to learn, and how, to teach them how to publish on international journals. They have other problems, okay? And it was challenging because I remember that on the first meetings that we had, we were, you were in this project, I guess. I remember, no? Yeah. So that at the beginning,
I never made it to Vietnam, to Iran, but I was there.
I remember you sent some colleagues.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the beginning, where we had some meetings, and we were talking about how to improve the internationalization process, how to improve the mobility of the students, how to improve all the issues related with internationalization. Well, they have an issue. They have clearly a political issue. There is a block on several countries that don't allow Iran to export, or mobility is really difficult. They need visa for everything, etc. So it's quite challenging, this. So we try to focus the cooperations with countries that will allow this cooperation to increase. But the thing is that they were not so interested. They were fully interested. For instance, I remember that one president told me, well, that's very nice what you do in Alicante, but I would like to work with Oxford and Cambridge. And of course, that's tricky, because you can tell them, that's basically not politically correct what I'm going to say. You can tell them, but maybe Cambridge and Oxford are not doing this kind of projects. So it's going to be difficult for them to work, because we're working on cooperation for development, we're working on capacity building, and these universities are usually working on other kind of projects. And sometimes it was hard for them to understand. Finally, I think we did a good job. It took a long time. This project was extended, etc. But that's one example of challenging context, and how to implement a project there.
And obviously, based on our own assumptions, we make assumptions about countries, and then we learn about more when we go there. And now, going to where you are, because you're almost like on the flip side of a lot of the experience of the student or academic staff who suddenly find themselves in a totally different country, and they don't come with money to impose whatever their culture is. You're having to adapt to the culture. So how has that been for you? What has been like coming to China and adapting to that new culture?
Yeah, complex at the beginning. Yeah, because I think the geopolitical scenario is also not supporting to improve this environment, this atmosphere. I knew already when I was coming here, because I was working in China before. I mean, not based here, but I was coming here before. I know some academics here, and I've been working with them, and I'm working at the moment with them. And I've seen a clear evolution on the society here, and is getting more complex to do activities with universities, frankly speaking. For instance, if now I want to go to a university here in my neighborhood, I can't go in myself. I need a permission, I need a visa, I need something. In the past was not needed. Later on, you have really, really smart people on these universities, really, brilliant people in any topic. China is leading publishing research in several topics, and I think they are really good. But I have to say that the current atmosphere is not supporting that. Besides that, I live very comfortable here. I think Beijing is a very nice city to live. I'm working on a project that is on policy level, and I mean, we have really nice counterparts trying to get the best on all the activities that we're doing. So I have no complaint at all on this. The only thing that, as I said, is that the atmosphere is a little bit more complex, more related with all the geopolitical scenario that we have. The Ukraine war, Israel and Palestine, all these kind of things at the end are affecting. And you see that on some activities that could be more sensitive, of course, you don't get the support that you were supposed to have, no? But yeah, in general, I have to say that I'm quite happy here. I have no complaint.
Is that largely because of your experience that you have traveled, you know what it's like to be in a different country and adapt to a different culture? Are you quite adaptable to new environments?
Yes, probably. Yeah, because on the last 25 years, I've been traveling about 100, 120 days per year. So yeah, I live several countries, and I think this could be, of course, helpful. The fact that I've been here working also before several times, of course, is helpful. Besides the problem that, I suffered only the last part of COVID here, where you can imagine how difficult it was, but it was all around the world difficult. And here, the policies that they implemented, I don't know, we can discuss about this, but in general, it seems that it worked. Because there were less people dying, etc. But they had an impact on how the people are living here, no? And this, I also suffered this. But this is, more or less almost forgotten. I don't know how fast the people can forget about these things. But now nobody is talking about COVID. Nobody's talking about another potential pandemic, etc. That's not in the agenda now.
Yeah, so like a very adaptable, and
yes.
I think it's quite interesting that when you come from a democracy where there's a kind of, you have the freedom to protest and you have the freedom to, and people, we live in a kind of a world where we like to complain and we like to kind of make more of things than they are. And then you see the resilience in other countries. I know I had a great speech from somebody recently where they were saying that high expectations make people less resilient, and I think it's a very interesting.
That's true. It is. Yeah.
Listen, just coming to kind of the end of this great interview, I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about the reasons you came to join us as a Global Council member, as part of Cascade, and the kind of direction of Cascade. It's great to have you on the Global Council. How do you see the role of Cascade? Why do you think Cascade has a role to play in terms of internationalization and the whole aspect of inequities in international education, what we can provide?
Yeah, well, I think there are, several opportunities at the moment for Cascade, especially I see on not only internationalization, or let's say internationalization of different areas on developing countries. So I think there are huge needs on, let's say, I'm thinking about what is closer to me now, Southeast Asia, for instance. There is an increasing number of higher education institutions. There is huge interest on the role that these universities are playing, for instance, for the regional development. And I see clearly that know-how coming from other countries, from the West, from the North, whatever you want to say it, to support all these processes. I think there is a huge opportunity of cooperating there. And I'm thinking on, for instance, on the cooperation between university and industry. I'm thinking about the gap that between higher education and the needs of employers. Problems that we have dealing for a long time, and the expertise that I see already in Cascade on several participants, etc., that could be transferred to those countries, that could be supported. And I think that could be also several kind of activities around these things, because they don't have to be projects. They could be something more isolated, maybe in a specific workshop in order to, I don't know, raise an issue on Cambodian universities or Vietnamese, whatever. So that I see a lot of opportunities clear, for Cascade.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that the one thing that's helping us, right, is that we're kind of bringing in people from all over the world. So kind of this kind of cultural exchange and knowledge exchange, and the fact that very often it's not a kind of global north to global south, but there's an exchange that goes both ways, and that's kind of
exactly
really
yes.
I think it's interesting because we're independent. It makes us more versatile to be able to do things like do a workshop here or do a co-creation session. I think that's great. Well, Roberto, I just want to thank you so much for coming to talk to us today and about your experience. And I know that we could talk for hours more about all the individual projects you've done. But maybe we should do that over a beer sometime. But in the meantime, best of to you in China, and hopefully we can do some more work together in the future, creating more mischief around the world somewhere. It'd be fantastic.
So, thanks to you, Mark. It was a great pleasure for me. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.